Chapter 1 Ancient Politics. In the time of the ancient Greeks, political philosophy started emerging that would contribute to modern-day discussions about justice, the organization of society, and what the best form of government is. Socrates discussed the concept of a philosopher king, an enlightened man that rules a society with the best intentions of the people in mind. Aristotle created the concept of deductive reasoning, which is using basic premises to build up to larger truths, an important tool for both logic and science. Later theologians, Augustine and Aquinas, would each at different times contribute to political philosophy as well. They saw humans as innately political beings and from this sought to define the relationship between human and divine law, with a central focus on the preservation of peace. They also debated the concept of the just war, or the morally acceptable use of state violence. Overall, Augustine recognized that an imperfect world sometimes demanded imperfect solutions, while Aquinas defined the conditions that made a just war. Chapter 2 Political Ideologies. Ideology can be defined as a set of beliefs that one has about the world and how it should operate, or as thinking structures on the way policy should be run. In politics, there are 5 main ideologies: liberalism, conservatism, fascism, communism, and socialism. Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy that emphasizes individual freedom, equality, and the protection of civil liberties, advocating for a political system that ensures that the civil rights of individuals are respected and that government power is limited and accountable. Civil liberties are fundamental personal rights and freedoms that are protected by law from government interference, such as freedom of speech, assembly, religion, and the right to privacy. Conservatism is the political and social philosophy that promotes the preservation of traditional institutions, practices, and values, emphasizing stability, continuity, and the importance of maintaining the social order. Fascism is an authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology that emphasizes dictatorial power, suppression of opposition, and social control of society and the economy. Communism aims to create a classless, stateless society where the means of production are owned and controlled collectively by the community with the goal of abolishing private property and promoting equality and social justice. Similarly, socialism advocates for collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods, emphasizing social equality, economic fairness, and the reduction or elimination of class distinctions. Another important idea is feminism, which is a group of social theories, moral philosophies, and related political movements that advocate social, political, and economic equality between the sexes. The feminist movement had 3 waves in the United States. The first wave in the early 1900s focused on the major political, social, and economic rights, including the right to vote. The second wave in the 1960s saw reproductive rights being added, and the third and final wave today incorporates concepts such as intersectionality and being more inclusive of race and gender. An important idea about government that many do not think about is the social contract. This is the unspoken agreement between individuals to give up certain natural rights in order to enjoy the benefits of society. For example, the citizens of a new colony agree to form a democratic government that enacts laws to protect their rights and property. If that government becomes tyrannical, they believe they have the right to revolt and establish a new government. Part of the idea of the social contract comes from Enlightenment philosophy. It holds that human beings in a state of nature or before they are part of a society will voluntarily give up some of their rights to join it because it then provides them with safety, prosperity, and more material goods than they would have had otherwise. English philosopher John Locke saw the social contract in a deeper light. He believed that humans are born neutral, neither good or bad, and that the social contract is only created as long as the government actually protects the rights that individuals give up. For example, you would not give up your right to protect yourself if your government can't protect you in turn. Chapter 3 United States Political Structure. An important system of government, especially for the U.S., is federalism. This is the system in which power is constitutionally divided between the national government and the constituent units. In the U.S., these are called states. In fact, the United States was the first country with a modern federal constitution that was adopted in 1879. Under federalism, national and state powers are clearly defined, with federal laws having supremacy over state ones and courts having the power to solve disputes between the federal and state governments. In the 19th century United States, the principles of dual federalism influenced the balance of power between the state and federal governments. This system established a division of powers with the state and federal governments operating independently within their own spheres of authority. This led to significant autonomy for state governments in limiting federal intervention in state matters. These ideas were also reinforced by Supreme Court decisions such as McCulloch v. Maryland and Gibbons v. Ogden, both of which delineated the boundaries of federal and state powers and emphasized sovereignty of each within their respective domains. In the U.S., state powers are referred to as reserve powers and include education, transportation, law enforcement, and health and safety regulations. Another important idea for the U.S., more so in the pre-Civil War era, is popular sovereignty. This is the principle that the authority of a government is derived from the consent of the governed. For example, the U.S. Constitution begins with "We the people," showing that government authority is based on the consent of the citizens. This is in contrast to legal or territorial sovereignty, which is recognized authority of a state over a defined geographic area and its legal framework regardless of the people's consent. The Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, is an example of this since it affirmed that each state has the right to govern its own territory without outside interference. Popular sovereignty only exists in the framework of legal or territorial sovereignty. The people consent to government authority over an area. Popular sovereignty is best seen through democratic processes such as elections, the protection of individual rights, and the system of checks and balances, all ensuring that government power remains accountable to the citizens it serves. The Declaration of Independence also represents this idea in supporting a government by the people, for the people. As a legal doctrine, it emphasizes the importance of citizens having the ultimate power, in contrast to the British monarchy, which vested power in a king or queen. In addition to the Declaration of Independence, the three founding documents of the United States also consist of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. American democracy was largely influenced by three important documents. The first is the Mayflower Compact of 1620, which set self-governance in the Plymouth colony. The second is the Articles of Confederation in 1777, which was the first constitution of the United States that established a weak central government and highlighted the need for a stronger federal framework. The third is the Federalist Papers of 1787 to 1788, which were a series of essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay to promote the ratification of the Constitution. The Articles of Confederation established a League of Friendship among the 13 sovereign states and was adopted by the Continental Congress on November 15, 1777, and came into effect on March 1, 1781. Its weak central government had limited powers that prioritized the sovereignty of individual states with no executive or judicial branches. This led to an inability to enforce laws and collect taxes that hindered its ability to address national issues. It also did not regulate interstate commerce, leading to trade disputes and economic instability, as well as amending it requiring unanimous consent from all 13 states, making it nearly impossible to address its shortcomings. As its weaknesses became increasingly apparent, a growing desire for a stronger central government led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 to address these issues and draft a new constitution. The resulting constitution established a federal system with a stronger central government divided into three legislative, executive, and judicial branches that provided a more effective and stable government for the United States. The three main parts of the Constitution are the preamble, the articles, and the amendments. The preamble, with the opening words, "We the people," outlines the goals of the Constitution, such as forming a more perfect union, establishing justice, and securing liberty. It serves as a moral and ethical compass for the nation that guides policymakers and citizens, as well as embodying shared values and aspirations to foster a sense of national unity and purpose. Overall, it is a document of popular sovereignty, deriving government from authority of the people themselves. The 7 articles of the Constitution are as follows. Article 1 is the legislative branch and creates the bicameral legislature of Congress composed of the House of Representatives and the Senate, outlining the powers of each, including to make laws, declare war, and levy taxes. Article 2 is the executive branch and establishes the presidency and defines their powers and duties, such as being commander-in-chief of the armed forces, signing bills into law, and conducting foreign policy. Article 3 is the judicial branch and creates the Supreme Court, giving Congress the power to establish lower federal courts and defines their jurisdiction, as well as granting the Supreme Court the power of judicial review. Article 4, Relations among the States, outlines the full faith and credit clause, the privileges and immunities clause, and the extradition clause. Article 5, the amendment process, describes the process for amending the Constitution, requiring 2/3 approval by Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the states. Article 6 is the Supremacy Clause and declares the Constitution, federal laws, and treaties to be the supreme law of the land. Article 7 is ratification and specifies that the Constitution would go into effect once ratified by 9 of the 13 states. The amendments section of the Constitution allows it to evolve and adapt to changing times and societal needs. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, guarantees fundamental rights and liberties. It was designed to protect individual liberties from government overreach by outlining specific rights that the government cannot infringe upon. The first 10 amendments are protections of freedoms, petitions, and assembly, the right to bear arms, no quartering of soldiers regarding search and arrest, rights in criminal cases, the right to a fair trial, rights in civil cases, bail, fines, and punishments, rights retained by the people, and states' rights. Subsequent amendments have expanded voting rights to include more citizens such as women, African Americans, and young adults, and in total there are now 27 amendments. The Reconstruction Amendments 13 to 15 respectively abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except for those convicted of a crime, established birthright citizenship with equal protection of the laws and protecting citizens from state abuses of rights, and the prohibition of discrimination in voting based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The 17th Amendment established the direct election of senators, which were previously chosen by state legislators. Ratified in 1920, the 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote, and later the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. Thanks to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the Constitution established a federal system with three branches of government and a system of checks and balances. Delegates also made compromises on representation, slavery, and the election of the president, with the Constitution granting the federal government more power and establishing it as a supreme law of the land. The Great Compromise settled the dispute over representation in Congress, creating a bicameral legislature with the House of Representatives based on population and the Senate with equal representation for each state. Another compromise was the 3/5 compromise, which determined that 3 out of every 5 slaves were counted when determining a state's total population for legislative representation and taxation. Concerning the Electoral College, a system was created where delegates struggled to agree on how to elect the president. Some wanted Congress to choose the president, while others feared a direct popular vote. The resulting compromise established electors who would cast the ballots for president, with each state appointing a number of electors equal to its congressional representation. The Electoral College's origins were influenced by concerns over executive power and slavery, with slave states having more influence from the 3/5 compromise. Over time, however, the system's assumptions about electors voting independently and the role of the House of Representatives in deciding elections became outdated. Each part of the legislative branch has its own unique features. The House of Representatives has representation based on population, ensuring that larger states have more representation, with 2-year term lengths leading to frequent elections and responsiveness to public opinion. It also often focuses on domestic issues and fiscal matters, with more formal and structured procedures having limited debate time. The presiding officer over the House of Representatives is the Speaker of the House, who is elected by House members and is second in the line of presidential succession after the Vice President. After the Speaker of the House in line is the President pro tempore of the Senate, with the line being outlined in the Presidential Succession Act. The Senate has equal representation for each state regardless of population, with term lengths of 6 years providing stability and long-term perspectives. It traditionally focuses on foreign policy and national security issues, with procedures less formal and structured, allowing for extended debates and filibusters. The Vice President is the highest-ranking member of the U.S. Senate and can cast tie-breaking votes. The effects of bicameralism on legislative power are checks and balances, opportunities for the representation of diverse interests, efficiency and gridlock, and accountability. Bills become law through a 7-step legislative process. First, either a representative or senator introduces a bill in their respective chamber of Congress. The bill is then assigned to a relevant committee for review and consideration. These committees hold hearings, debate the bill, and may make amendments before they choose to pass, reject, or table it. If the committee passes the bill, it is debated on by the full chamber that it was introduced to. If it passes, it is transferred to and debated in the other full chamber. If there are differences between the House and Senate versions of the bill when each passes it, a conference committee is formed to reconcile them. After this, the bill is sent to the president, who can either sign it into law, veto it, which Congress can override with a 2/3 majority in both chambers, or do nothing in what is called a pocket veto, because if Congress adjourns within 10 days of submitting the bill and the president has not signed it, it is automatically vetoed. In politics, power is the ability or capacity to influence, control, or direct the behavior of others, events, or outcomes, and can manifest in various other forms, like military, social, or personal power as well. Political power is often exercised through authority, coercion, persuasion, or resources. 4 examples of the federal government's powers are the authority to declare war, raise and maintain an army and navy, regulate interstate and foreign commerce, and coin money. 4 examples of the state's powers are authority over education, transportation, law enforcement, and health and safety regulations. The powers delegated to state governments are referred to as reserved powers and are granted by the 10th Amendment. Each of the 3 branches of the U.S. government also have their own unique individual powers as well. The legislative branch's powers are listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, including its main power to pass laws, but also to declare war, borrow money, establish post offices, regulate commerce, create federal statutes through Congress, and create state statutes through state legislatures. It can also approve budgets and approve and impeach federal judges as well, to check and balance against the judicial branch. The judicial branch's overall power is to interpret the U.S. Constitution through the highest court, the Supreme Court, with the final say on constitutional matters through judicial review, where it determines which laws and policies are and are not constitutional. The judicial branch also includes criminal and civil courts as well. The executive branch is responsible for implementing and enforcing federal laws passed by Congress, ensuring that they are carried out effectively. It also oversees various government agencies and departments, managing the day-to-day operations of the federal government and ensuring that services are delivered to the public. On top of this, the executive branch also manages foreign relations, negotiates treaties with Senate approval, and directs national defense and military operations, with the president as commander-in-chief of the armed forces as well. Additionally, the president can issue executive orders, directives that have the force of law, to manage the operations of the federal government. It is important, though, to separate the enforcement of federal and state laws. The president enforces federal laws, while governors and all state law enforcement enforce state laws. In a modern era, a U.S. president faces many challenges and responsibilities. Some of the most significant are to address complex domestic issues such as healthcare, economic inequality, education, and infrastructure, navigating an increasingly interconnected and volatile global landscape, managing relationships with allies and adversaries, addressing global threats like terrorism and climate change, and maintaining U.S. leadership in international organizations. In the executive branch, the Cabinet's duty is to advise the President on various policy issues and consists of the heads of the executive departments alongside other key officials. The concept of three branches of government is known as a separation of powers, which can also include between the higher and lower levels of government as well. This is important to reduce the risk of a single branch becoming too powerful and abusing its authority, thereby preventing tyranny, to promote checks and balances, and to protect individual rights by limiting the power of any one branch and safeguarding individual liberties and preventing oppressive government actions. One very important issue that has plagued the United States for the past century and a half is civil rights. These are the rights of individuals to receive equal treatment and to be free from discrimination in the various spheres of life, including education, employment, and housing, and access to public facilities. They're designed to ensure that all individuals have equal protection under the law and are often enforced through legislation and court decisions. The 14th Amendment was implemented to grant citizenship, due process, and equal protection with an initial focus on formerly enslaved people, but has broadened and evolved over time to significantly expand civil rights and equal protection under the law, influencing landmark Supreme Court decisions on issues such as racial segregation, gender discrimination, and same-sex marriage, each time reflecting changing societal values and legal principles. Ultimately, it is the core values and beliefs of America that influence the government's functioning the most. Individualism, liberty, equality, and democracy profoundly influence the democratic system by shaping citizens' expectations of government and guiding political behavior and civic engagement. These values also impact public policy, driving debates on issues like civil rights, economic regulation, and social welfare, reflecting the evolving priorities and ideologies of the American populace. There are several important Supreme Court or SCOTUS cases in American history. Marbury v. Madison in 1803 established the principle of judicial review, giving the Supreme Court the power to declare laws and executive actions unconstitutional, asserting its power to interpret the Constitution and to check the legislative and executive branches. McCulloch v. Maryland in 1918 upheld the constitutionality of the Second Bank of the United States and affirmed the federal government's implied powers, with the federal government being supreme over state governments. This came from Maryland trying to tax the second bank, but the court held that states cannot tax federal institutions. Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 established the doctrine of separate but equal, which meant that as long as facilities were separate, they could be unequal. Homer Plessy, a mixed-race individual, challenged a Louisiana law requiring racial segregation on railroads. The Supreme Court upheld the law, arguing that segregation did not violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause as long as the facilities were separate but equal, having a profound impact on American society and leading to widespread racial segregation, especially in the South, with Jim Crow laws enacted to enforce it in various aspects of life, including education, transportation, and public accommodation. Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 overturned the separate but equal doctrine, with the court unanimously ruling that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. The decision was ignited by the civil rights movement and inspired activists to fight for equal rights for all, emboldening African Americans to challenge segregation in other areas of life as well, such as housing, employment, and voting. Miranda v. Arizona in 1966 was a landmark Supreme Court case that established the principle that law enforcement officers must inform suspects of their constitutional rights before questioning them, significantly impacting the rights of individuals in police custody. Other important SCOTUS cases are Gibbons v. Ogden in 1824, Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857, Schenck v. United States in 1919, Gideon v. Wainwright in 1963, Tinker v. Des Moines in 1969, Roe v. Wade in 1973, Citizens United v. FEC in 2010, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022, and Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard in 2023. Public opinion is one of the central driving forces of a democratic government. Public opinion is the expression of the central population's thoughts on a particular issue. It is most often determined through public opinion polls, with many factors affecting it, such as politicians, news media, socioeconomic status, major world events, and opinion leaders. Political socialization, the process by which people form their ideas about politics, is another important topic. It can be affected by personal, economic, mass media, and world event factors. Some of these also influence voter turnout in elections. Socioeconomic status, education level, age, race, and political engagement all affect it, with higher turnout typically seen among individuals with greater resources and civic involvement. Regional differences such as state voting laws, access to polling places, and cultural attitudes towards voting can significantly affect voter turnout rates across different demographics as well. Voting systems themselves can be different, with there being plurality and majority voting systems. Plurality voting occurs when the candidate with the most votes wins, regardless of whether they achieve a majority of votes, which can lead to outcomes where a candidate wins without broad support. Majority voting requires a candidate to receive more than 50% of the votes to win, often leading to runoff elections if no candidate meets this threshold, thereby promoting broader consensus among voters. There is also a difference between direct and indirect elections. A direct election means that the popular vote directly determines the outcome of an election. The popular vote refers to the actual votes of the people. The U.S. uses this for electing representatives. An indirect election, on the other hand, is one in which an intermediary body elected by the people is responsible for the outcome of an election. The Electoral College that determines the president is an example of a process in an indirect election. The U.S. uses this for the presidency. Sometimes there are runoff elections where no candidate receives enough votes to be declared the winner in the original election. A runoff election will be held as well. This circumstance is accomplished by eliminating candidates that receive the fewest votes. The United States election process has three parts. In primary elections, parties select their nominees for various offices where voters choose between candidates within their party. In general elections, voters cast ballots for candidates from different parties to fill federal, state, and local offices. In presidential elections, the Electoral College, a body of electors from each state, formally elects the president and vice president. The number of electors per state is based on its population. With campaigns, funds are raised and spent to promote candidates, political parties, or policy initiatives and referendums. Campaign finances encompass all the money used in political campaigns, from individual donations to large contributions from corporations and organizations. One important and integral factor of elections is political parties. In the U.S., these evolved to make it easier to select qualified candidates to help make policy decisions. The members work together to develop a set of ideals and positions called the party's political platform. They also act as the organized opposition to the party in power. In total, there are three types of political parties. Mass parties are the most recognizable, catch-all parties which seek to gain as many members as possible, even if that degrades their platform. Niche parties form around a specific issue, such as environmentalism, and cadre parties seek to allow elites to retain power. Somewhat similar to political parties are interest groups, which serve as advocates for specific causes or issues, mobilizing resources and public support to influence policymakers and shape legislation in alignment with their objectives. Through strategies such as lobbying, campaign contributions, and grassroots mobilization, they play a significant role in the electoral process by endorsing candidates, funding campaigns, and raising awareness about their causes. The four types of interest groups are business groups, trade associations, citizen groups, and professional associations. Interest groups' direct strategies to achieve their goals include lobbying/influencing techniques, rating government officials, building alliances, and offering campaign assistance. Their indirect strategies include generating public pressure, using constituents as lobbyists, and public protest demonstrations. The act of attempting to influence the actions of a government official, most often legislators or members of regulatory agencies, is called lobbying. Lobbyists are individuals or groups who advocate for specific interests such as businesses, industries, labor unions, or nonprofit organizations. In total, there are four methods of lobbying. Direct lobbying is meeting with lawmakers or their staff to discuss specific legislation or regulations. Grassroots lobbying is mobilizing public opinion through letter-writing campaigns, protests, or public opinion efforts. Coalition building is when alliances with other groups are made to increase their influence in campaign contributions and provide financial support to candidates who are sympathetic to their causes. Political action committees, or PACs, are regulated by the Federal Election Commission and raise and spend money to elect or defeat political candidates by contributing directly to candidates or engaging in independent political activities. Super PAC, or Super Political Action Committees, are a type of political committee that may raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, associations, and individuals to spend on independent political activities such as advertising for or against a candidate, but cannot coordinate directly with their campaign and must operate independently. Dark money is political spending where the source of the money is not disclosed to the public and often occurs through nonprofit organizations that are not required to reveal their donors. These organizations can spend heavily on political campaigns, issue advocacy, and lobbying without disclosing the identities of their funders. The lack of transparency associated with dark money raises concerns about the influence of wealthy individuals and corporations on elections and policymaking. Electoral outcomes can also be affected by gerrymandering. This is the process of redrawing electoral district boundaries to benefit a particular political party by concentrating or dispersing voters of certain demographics, impacting the balance of political power. With political parties and interest groups comes the existence of political pluralism alongside cultural pluralism. Political pluralism is a system where multiple political parties and interest groups coexist and compete for power, allowing for diverse representation and the incorporation of various viewpoints in governance. Meanwhile, cultural pluralism emphasizes the coexistence of diverse cultural groups within a society, advocating for the recognition and respect of different cultural identities and practices while promoting social harmony and inclusion. It is also integral to note that media involvement has many impacts in elections. It can significantly enhance voter engagement by providing information about candidates, policies, and electoral processes, thereby shaping public opinion and facilitating informed decision-making. The media can also introduce bias and misinformation, which can undermine the integrity of the democratic process by distorting perceptions and polarizing public sentiment. In the U.S., an additional important idea is separation of church and state that seeks to keep government and religion separate. It states that the government should not favor or promote any particular religion, and religious institutions should not have undue influence on government policies or laws. This helps to protect religious freedom and prevent the government from becoming too involved in religious matters. This idea became important to the Founding Fathers because many had witnessed religious persecution firsthand either in their home countries or in the American colonies, which were home to people of various religious denominations. The diversity of religious faiths made it difficult to establish any one state religion and led many to advocate for religious tolerance. Chapter 4. The Roles of U.S. Citizens. Citizens of the United States have several responsibilities. This includes obeying and adhering to federal, state, and local laws, paying taxes to fund government services, participating in the justice system by serving on juries, exercising the right to choose elected officials by voting, staying informed by keeping up to date on current events and issues, and respecting the rights of others by tolerating diverse viewpoints and treating others with dignity. Direct action involves taking immediate, visible, and often unconventional actions to achieve specific goals. There are 4 types of direct action. Civil disobedience involves peacefully breaking unjust laws to protest against them. Protests and demonstrations can draw attention to important issues and mobilize public opinion. Strikes and boycotts by labor unions and other groups have also been used to pressure employers and governments to address workers' rights, fair wages, and safe working conditions. And occupations and sit-ins involve physically occupying spaces to disrupt business as usual and demand change. Collective action is a set of actions taken by a group of people to achieve a common vision that can be social or political and can involve co-creating and implementing systemic change programs. There are also 4 types of collective action. Social movements such as the environmental or LGBTQ rights movements mobilize large numbers of people to advocate for specific causes. Community organizing involves building power within local communities to address issues like housing, education, and healthcare. Participating in elections and advocating for specific policies through voting and political engagement are essential forms of collective action. And social media activism has become powerful for organizing, mobilizing, and raising awareness about social issues. 3 examples of groups and individuals who use collective and indirect action are Rosa Parks when she refused to give up her seat, Occupy Wall Street, and anti-war protests. The primary goal of the LGBTQ+ rights movement post-1960s was to achieve equal rights and social acceptance of LGBTQ+ individuals. The movement gained momentum after the 1969 Stonewall riots in response to a police raid at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. These riots sparked activism and the formation of LGBTQ+ advocacy groups, leading to increased visibility and advocacy for legal protections and marriage equality. Additionally, the Supreme Court ruled with the Obergefell v. Hodges decision in 2015 that the right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples nationwide under the 14th Amendment, marking a significant victory for LGBTQ+ rights. In a somewhat similar vein was the landmark legislation of the Equal Pay Act of 1963, which aimed to abolish wage disparity based on sex, mandating equal pay for equal work, a major victory for women's rights in the workplace. The women's rights movement had several other key achievements post-1960s as well, including the legalization of abortion with Roe v. Wade, increased political representation, and Title IX in 1972, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in federally funded sports and education programs, significantly impacting women's participation in sports and academics. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, of 1990 is also important in its prohibition of discrimination against individuals with disabilities, securing them equal opportunities in employment, public accommodations, transport, and government services. Some key figures in the disability rights movement were Ed Roberts, the father of the independent living movement, Judy Heumann, who played a crucial role in advocating for the passage of the ADA, and Justin Dart, who also helped advocate for the passage of the ADA and co-founded the American Association of People with Disabilities, making him what is known as the godfather of the ADA. Chapter 5. Types of government. A government is defined as a system or group of individuals with the authority to make and enforce laws and policies for a specific political entity, such as a state or nation. It also encompasses various institutions and structures that manage public affairs, maintain order, provide services, and protect the rights and freedoms of citizens. 3 common types of government are autocracy, aristocracy, and democracy. An autocracy has one leader who controls all decision-making with no constitution to limit their power, and who is often called a dictator. An aristocracy is ruled by leaders who inherit power through their family's bloodline and can function with or without a constitution. In a democracy, citizens are involved in either voting for leaders to represent them or directly participating in decision-making themselves. There are also monarchies and unconstitutional monarchies, oligarchies, direct or representative democracies, democratic republics, and theocracies. In general, democratic societies emphasize individual rights, limited government, and representative democracy, prioritize social injustice, economic equality, and welfare programs, and are characterized by tolerance, compromise, and respect for the rule of law. Structure and institutions in democratic societies include representative democracy, separation of powers, checks and balances, free and fair elections, and rule of law. Examples of democratic societies are the United States, a federal republic with a presidential system; Canada, a federal parliamentary democracy with a constitutional monarchy; Germany, a federal parliamentary republic; Japan, a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system; and Australia, a federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy. Three characteristics of non-democratic societies are authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and a restrictive political culture. Authoritarianism concentrates power in the hands of a single leader or small group, often suppressing dissent. Totalitarianism seeks to control all aspects of citizens' lives, including their thoughts and beliefs. The restrictive political cultures are often characterized by obedience, conformity, and a strong sense of nationalism. The structures and institutions in these societies include one-party and authoritarian rule, limited or no elections, restricted civil liberties, and weak or non-existent rule of law. Examples of this are China, a one-party state ruled by the Chinese Communist Party; North Korea, a totalitarian state with a hereditary dictatorship; Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy with a theocratic government; Syria, an authoritarian regime with a strong military presence; and Belarus, an authoritarian state with a strongman leader. Sometimes government can go through a process called devolution, or the transfer of power from higher to lower levels of government, like federal to state or local governments. Local governments are those that run local cities, towns, and counties, including police and fire departments, libraries, local schools, and utilities. Chapter 6. Globalization and Power. International organizations such as the United Nations and the World Trade Organization play a crucial role in promoting cooperation, facilitating dialogue, and addressing global challenges, including security threats, climate change, and humanitarian crises. These organizations are integral with constantly shifting geopolitical alliances and their impacts on global economic stability and international security. These alliances alter trade routes, investment flows, and economic policies that can lead to uncertainties in markets and can shift power balances, potentially increasing the risk of conflicts or fostering new areas of cooperation. The United Nations, or UN, is the primary international organization aimed at maintaining international peace and security. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is a military alliance between North American and European countries. The European Union, EU, is a political and economic union of 27 member states, primarily in Europe. The World Trade Organization, WTO, is an intergovernmental organization that regulates international trade. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, oversees the global finance system, and the World Bank provides loans and grants to developing countries. Cooperation can help societies by pooling resources and efforts to achieve goals that would normally be impossible alone, finding common ground and making concessions for reaching agreements and moving forward, and can foster a sense of community and trust, which is vital for a healthy democracy. Conflicts can lead to changes in societies by encouraging the exchange of ideas, leading to a deeper understanding of issues, can spark innovative solutions by challenging the status quo, and disagreements can expose flaws in systems and institutions, prompting necessary reforms. Globalization is the process of increased interconnectedness and interdependence among countries, economies, and cultures driven by advancements in technology, trade, communication, and transportation. It involves the movement of goods, services, information, and people across borders, leading to a more integrated global economy and facilitating cultural exchanges and the spread of ideas. Globalization can have several influences on various societies. Local traditions and identities may be overshadowed by dominant global influences, potentially resulting in the loss of unique cultural practices. It can also foster cultural exchange and awareness, allowing societies to preserve and even rejuvenate their traditions by sharing them on a global stage. Globalization can influence cultural identity and the preservation of local traditions in various societies as well. Local traditions and identities may be overshadowed by dominant global influences, potentially resulting in the loss of unique cultural practices. It can also foster cultural exchange and awareness, allowing societies to preserve and even rejuvenate their traditions by sharing them on a global stage. As I said previously, power is the ability or capacity to influence, control, or direct the behavior of others, events, or outcomes. In international relations, power includes both tangible and intangible factors. Some of the tangible factors are size, population, technology, and wealth of a state. and some of the intangible factors are nationalism, political culture, and ideology. Power can also have different polarities. In a unipolar system, there is only one center of power where one state pretty much can influence and dominate all other international actors. A bipolar system, one step up, has two centers of power, and all states align with either one or the other centers of power, like in the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the United States. There is also the multipolar system, in which power is diffused among many different states, where all players have fairly equal influence and can act independently. One way that nations flaunted power until the mid-20th century was colonialism and imperialism. Colonialism involves acquiring and maintaining colonies with direct control and settlement, aiming to exploit resources and spread the colonizer's culture. Imperialism extends a nation's power and influence through various means, including economic pressure, diplomacy, or military force, without necessarily establishing direct territorial control. Multilateralism is an approach to foreign policy that involves countries working together to address global issues through international organizations and cooperation, emphasizing diplomacy, negotiation, and international law. Meanwhile, isolationism is a foreign policy strategy that involves a government minimizing its involvement in international affairs and focusing on domestic issues, seeking to avoid alliances, treaties, and international commitments. The final topic is a very important document to international law and the promotion of human rights globally, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Adopted in 1948, this document establishes a foundational framework for international human rights law, guiding the development of treaties, conventions, and national legislation aimed at protecting individual rights. This document also inspired global movements for justice and equality, encouraging countries to uphold human rights standards and hold violators accountable.